A little while back, I decided to try out and review as many Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories mods and ROM hacks as I could find, and there were a lot more than I initially anticipated, making it quite the undertaking. However, it appears it was worth the effort as many of you seemed to enjoy that video and appreciated having an actual catalogue of the available mods for the game. So naturally, as a follow-up to that video, I decided to do the same thing for Forbidden Memories' pseudo-sequel, Yu-Gi-Oh! The Duelists of the Roses. If you're unfamiliar with the game, despite it being the successor to Forbidden Memories, it actually plays very differently, with a more chess-like gameplay style, where you have a deck leader in place of a king, and your pieces are the monsters you summon. It's certainly very unique, and can be hard to wrap your head around at first, but it makes for a much more intricate game with actual strategy and depth, which I didn't understand at all when I was younger, so I only developed a proper appreciation for this game after replaying it more recently. And it seems, similarly to Forbidden Memories, this game houses a lot of love and nostalgia from long-time Yu-Gi-Oh! Fans. However, in contrast to it, there are significantly less mods available for Duelists of the Roses, which is likely due to the inclusion of 3D models for each card that are always on field, so modding in new cards especially would be quite challenging, I assume. In total, it appears as though there are 6 mods for Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelists of the Roses, and I'll leave a link to each of them in the description. These mods are Redux, All Cards mod, TCG mod, Chaos mod, Project GEMINI, and REWORKED. If you know of any others missing from this list, be sure to let me know in the comments. Because there were significantly less mods to explore than with Forbidden Memories, I was able to visit each one in much more depth by spending a live stream on each looking into them all individually. So if you'd like to see any of these mods in more detail, the VODs for those will also be linked in the description. Whether it's making the game more difficult, modifying the starter decks and maps, or even changing the cards you can acquire and the fusions you can perform with them, all of these mods each add their own unique twists on the game and how it's played. So hopefully even the veteran Duelists of the Roses player can find a fresh new experience in one of these mods. Well, without further ado, let's take a look at the first mod on our list, Duelists of the Roses Redux. First things first though, I should cover how this mod, as well as a few of the others, are installed, because the downloads available typically only provide us with the mod patch, not the actual game file itself. So the first thing to do is to totally legally acquire a US version of the Duelists of the Roses game ISO file. Not sure why, but it specifically has to be the US version. After you have the game file, it would be wise to make a backup of it, so you won't need to re-download the vanilla game again later on if you need it. Then you need to download the patch from the link in the description. And once you extract the zip file, there is a readme file you can use to help you get set up and see an outline of the changes made. But the quick version is this. Open the Patcher software. For Redux this is PPF-O-Matic, but other mods typically use Delta Patcher. The process is the same for both though. Simply fill out the file box with the directory of the game file you want to patch, then in the patch box, put in the directory of the mod you want to apply. Wait for it to finish, then you're all done, and you just need to load it up onto your favourite totally real PlayStation 2 console. With that out of the way, we can begin our journey into Duelists of the Roses Redux. This mod begins similarly enough, with the 5-minute long introduction to the story, but when you get to selecting your starter deck, you'll notice none of the usual suspects are present. That's because the first change this mod makes is reworking all of the starter decks, with new deck leaders and more cards that are actually compatible with each other, giving you more fusions and options for strategies. I ended up picking Reaper of the Cards as my starter deck, and I guess what drew me to picking it was my natural affinity to masochism, because I didn't learn till later on that despite this deck hosting one of the strongest base game fusions from the get-go, it is actually supposedly the second most difficult deck to start with. Only beaten by the Buku starter deck, which was intentionally designed as a challenge run deck. And to make matters worse, I decided I would be showcasing all of these mods by going through the Kyberside route, and you'll see why that made this even more difficult than necessary in a minute. First though, we should take a proper look through what we get in the starter deck. This deck features a lot of fiends and zombie type monsters, or in my own words, clowns. Clowns and reapers. Oh no, I've picked the gay clown deck. It also features quite a lot of effects to either spellbind enemy cards or avoid triggering traps, so this deck already seems quite technical. Starting with Copycat was also a surprise, as that card can be very powerful when used correctly. Other than that, we also get a few other spells and traps that are pretty standard for a Duelists of the Roses starter deck. Heading into our first duel against Taya, there are two noticeable differences straight away. First of all, her deck leader has changed, and honestly, Petite Angel does make much more sense than Dancing Elf for Taya to use. The second is that the map is very different, and this is a change I personally love about this mod, as the maps are much more thematic to the characters and locations where you fight them. I didn't realise it at first, but Taya's map is based off of a church, with the cross of normal field in the middle, and the walls and toon spaces along the edges meant to represent stained glass windows, which is really cool. This is in essence what this mod is designed to do. It takes many of the areas where the base game falls short and aims to improve them. The decks are more useful, the maps are more interesting, all cards are now obtainable, and you may also notice the artwork on the cards is now their Japanese uncensored versions, which is cool. Even Fusion's got a rework to include some new combinations and fix some fusions that didn't work properly before. This does also mean they resolved the issue of the base game being far too easy, by flipping it and making this version of the game insanely difficult. All enemy leaders have their rank maxed out, which means they all have some crazy abilities you have to play around, which is why choosing the deck I did was a terrible mistake, as zombies get eternally spellbound near Taya's deck leader, and fiends straight up evaporate, and this is on top of also buffing her own creatures. My poor life choices aside, this duel is going to be brutal regardless, as she has a ton of field advantage and frequently plays 2000 plus attack monsters with equips as well. Judging from this first duel, it seems as though this mod is designed to make you grind in order to streamline the deck towards your preferred strategy before starting the campaign. And if you're like me, you probably didn't even realise that a way to duel your own deck to get more copies of your own cards existed, because in the base game there was never a need to go into free duel and grind. More evidence to support this is the custom duel fields that have been added to the free duel menu, which include maps perfect for instantly winning via checkmate and allowing you to roll for copies of your deck leader, and a map that keeps the enemy trapped so you can wait 99 turns in order to easily promote any cards you wish. Speaking of which, card promotions are also 5 times faster with this mod, and every leader has the hidden card find ability by default, which is nice considering how in the base game I actually didn't know that was a game mechanic that existed, and promotions are normally so slow I beat the game a couple of times before I ever actually saw my first one. I think requiring the player to grind before even starting the first campaign duel is my only issue really with this mod, and maybe that's just because I got unlucky with the choices I made, and other starter decks or the Yugi side route would have made things more forgiving. But overall, I really like this mod and the changes it makes. I definitely would like to revisit this one later on, as I didn't get very far in the campaign despite spending 6 hours on it, with most of that being me fusing Pumpkin and waiting for him to get strong enough that he can beat the enemy cards. I think this mod does a really good job of rectifying a lot of the weaker areas of the base game. I especially like the new map designs, giving a lot more flavour to the duels. But the difficulty definitely makes this feel like it was designed with highly experienced players in mind, so be careful entering this if you're not super familiar with the original game. The next mod on the list is the All Cards mod, which despite the name, making all cards obtainable is not the only change it makes. This is another mod by Clovis, the same creator as the previous mod Redux, but this one aims to keep the game more vanilla, and focuses more on quality of life changes. Like, for example, one of my favourite changes this mod makes is skipping the intro sequence, taking you straight to inputting your name after hitting new game. Which is great for people like me who are sick of getting kidnapped by Simon and forced to listen to his speech every time. You'll notice all of the starter deck options are default, albeit some of them may have some minor changes apparently. And as you head into the first duel against Taya, you'll notice her field and deck are also normal. So what does this mod actually change exactly? Well, as the title suggests, all cards are now available, meaning that rare cards you normally can't acquire will appear in the post-game graveyard slot machine or as jackpot rewards. And along with some other tweaks to deck leader abilities, every leader has access to the on-field hidden card find function and the bonus slots ability that gives access to more lines in the slot machine, making getting jackpots easier. Cards also get promoted much quicker, similarly to Redux, and on top of this, you can also now reincarnate after every single duel instead of every 5. These changes give you access to a lot more cards than you would normally encounter, and provide you the freedom to modify your deck more thoroughly throughout the course of a standard campaign playthrough. There are a couple other interesting changes to note, with the first being the simple yet really pleasing change that the AI no longer goes over and double taps every single card, even if they don't intend to move it, which saves so much time. The other is making rituals more of a viable strategy by allowing you to perform them from the hand, and you do this by combining the key monster for the ritual with the ritual spell itself. All in all, there's not much to really say about this mod, but its simplicity is what makes it one of my favourites from the list. The changes it makes are all small things that help improve the overall experience that the base game provides, without completely revamping the campaign like with Redux. It's the game you recognise and love, just better, with the kinds of quality of life changes I think most people desired were in the original game to begin with. There are a couple other changes as well I was unaware of during my own playthrough, which I learned later on, which are that all campaign enemies are included in the free duel menu and without a deck cost restriction once you finish the game. The Crush Card Virus spell has been changed into a field spell, and Clown cards are strengthened by toon spaces. I would say that a few of its changes do help make the game feel a little easier, but not drastically so, as I was able to complete the Seto campaign comfortably within the span of one livestream. If you're thinking about replaying Duels of the Roses and aren't looking for anything too different or challenging, then I would highly recommend giving this mod a try. I get the feeling I'll be using this version of the game for any future casual playthroughs myself. Moving on, we have the TCG mod. This is certainly the most unique mod on the list, and I'm not just saying that because this is the only mod that comes with a pre-patched ISO file, meaning it's ready to play immediately without any faffing around with patches and very legally acquired ROMs. No, what makes this mod so interesting is that, as the name suggests, it changes monster fusions to be more in line with their TCG versions. But if the changes were as simple as just that, I don't think I would have loved it as much as I do. You'll notice the starting deck options are the same as normal. However, when you load into the map, you may notice the deck cost of said starting deck is huge. And this is because, alongside changing the starting deck drastically in order to match the new system for fusions, the deck costs of cards have also changed, which for monster cards now reflects their level multiplied by 10. And it seems the Tactical Warrior starter deck I chose is themed around Joey, with plenty of warrior-focused equip spells and the fusion materials for monsters like Flame Swordsman and Gilsha the D-Knight, which is pretty cool and makes me wonder what fusions the other starter decks are themed around. But it's as soon as you head into your first duel is when you'll see the main reason why this mod is so fascinating to me. Because you'll notice the field is only 3 spaces wide, with the rest being blocked via labyrinth spaces, meaning the playable area is a thin column of 21 spaces. You know, they called it the TCG mod, but this actually feels more like Rush Duel than the standard TCG. And to its credit, making the maps like this does make the game more like the TCG, for better or worse, because by removing the element of being able to move around the map, the duels do end up being more focused on getting a big creature out fast and swinging them at your opponent. Which also means duels end really fast, like really fast, as in I'm talking within the span of a 4.5 hour long livestream, I beat both Seto and Yugi side's campaign. There are a few other changes that also play into why this mod was so quick and easy, like how every deck leader has access to the same array of abilities from the start, being support range extension, level cost reduction, a buff to same type, and a debuff to their opposing type. On top of this, they also have the secret extra slots ability and the hidden card find function, with the latter being another cause for the crazy imbalancing issues, because I believe most, if not all of the maps have the hidden card be 1 space forward of your starting position. So they're very easy and not risky at all to acquire, and some of the cards they give you are insanely strong, like Royal Decree from Meiko Tsunami, nullifying all trap cards, or Mimicat from Pegasus, allowing you to copy any 1 card from the graveyard. Promotions are also massively accelerated, which doesn't really change much seeing as everybody gets the same abilities from rank 1, however this does mean you can swap and change your deck leader pretty much at will to whoever you like. I like having pretty ladies as my deck leader, so maybe we just stay with the Protector of the Throne. Damn. She got a Grippers out? Sheesh! Alright, anyway. You may have noticed as well in this first duel that Taya has Dark Magician Girl as her deck leader here, which is terrifying to see in your first duel, but thankfully this is just because the enemy character decks and leaders are meant to be modified to be more accurate to their depictions in the anime and early games, meaning Taya uses her favourite card stolen straight from Yugi's deck as her deck leader, despite her deck actually consisting more so of the fairy type cards you'll remember her using in her duel against Mai during Duelist Kingdom, like Shining Friendship, Happy Lover, and Fairy's Gift, with probably her scariest option being Dark Witch. The playable map area is filled with mountain terrain, which she benefits from however, so expect everything she plays to be buffed by at least 500 attack. And this is a consistent theme that the field will be filled to the enemy benefit in most cases. Because of this, the first duel or so can be pretty challenging, But so long as you don't rush at the enemy deck leader, the starting deck should provide you with enough resources to make a monster or two strong enough to tackle whatever they throw at you. Oddly enough, the graveyard slot machine is actually one area that remains mostly unchanged. Jackpots are easier thanks to the bonus slots ability we have, but the actual cards you can and can't acquire here I believe are all the same as the base game. A major change here, however, is the reincarnation mechanic. All cards bar the Immortals, Fusions, and Ritual monsters are obtainable through this function. And if you didn't know, the reincarnate function works by providing you with cards of similar deck cost to the one you sacrifice. So if you perhaps picked up a particularly high cost card either through the hidden card find or the slots jackpot, and you aren't planning on using it, you can get some insanely strong cards out of it instead. So after the first 5 wins, the rest of the game just becomes a power trip that gets more and more out of hand the further along you get. Overall, I wouldn't say it's the best mod out of the lot, but I had a lot of fun with this one, so it holds a special place in my heart. If you're an experienced player looking for a new challenge, you aren't exactly going to find it here. However, this mod can offer you a unique experience vastly different to any other mods out there, and it provides you with a way to enjoy the game in its most unhinged possible form. So if you're looking for something short and sweet to occupy an afternoon, then I'd say give this mod a try and see a sillier side of Duelists of the Roses. Next up is the Chaos mod, and while the name sounds intimidating, the most chaos we encountered occurred before we even started the game. We're back with more Duelists of the Roses! And my controller immediately disconnected. Come on! My controller disconnected and that crashed my totally real PS2. Wow! Other than that, this is actually one of the most well put together mods out there, with a very nice balance in its difficulty, whereby duels are winnable without any grinding required. However, you will need to actually strategize and play smart, as you don't have many opportunities to make big beat sticks in the start, and wasting your best combo pieces will quickly leave you in an unwinnable situation. It does have a peculiar installation process however, because when you go to patch your game file, you'll find 2 patches to choose from in the folder you downloaded. The purpose of this is to make your first duel a little more forgiving for the campaign you choose, and then increasing the difficulty of the first duels on the other side of the campaign, making your New Game Plus a little bit more challenging. So, because I'm opting to choose Kyberside campaign first, aka the Yorkist side, I would use the Versus Lancastrians patch, and this will make Taya's duel a little easier while jumping up the difficulty for Rex and Weevil. This mod also comes with some texture replacements, with the main change being the overworld map's water is now blue, which honestly looks so much nicer than the weird piss water we would normally get. To install this, you just need to copy the textures folder that comes with the mod, and paste it into the textures folder that you'll find in your PCSX2 folder, within your documents folder. Then, in the graphics options of PCSX2, just ensure the load textures and pre-cache textures boxes are enabled. This is optional, and the mod should run without it if you aren't bothered, but it's nice because this texture will be compatible with other mods, and even the vanilla version of the game if you like it. Heading into the actual game now, after the usual prelude, you'll get to choose one of the new starter deck options. It appears every starter deck has been changed, and some of the options are quite interesting. Also, my choice was in no way influenced by a certain VTuber's recent graduation announcement. Maybe that's why I was so drawn to Abyss Flower. I was like, it must be because of Bakura? No. Ceres Fauna. No, this is saplings after Fauna graduates. That's what this is. This is the average sapling a week after graduation. You may have noticed the music in the deck builder has also changed. I'm not sure where it was taken from, but it's very somber. Anyways, the starting decks appear to be very nicely themed, with this one offering plenty of plants and plant-based warriors and fiends. Nothing that strong though, but thankfully it also offers some solid strategies and fusion potential, with some of the strongest being Queen of Autumn Leaves and Rose Spectre of Dun, who can then be buffed by a few of our other cards to reach around 3000 attack. There are a couple of nice spell and trap cards, but quite a few feel like filler you'll want to be replacing ASAP. As we enter the first duel against Taya, you'll notice that, as per usual with these mods, the field is heavily biased towards the enemy advantage, with Taya having a large area of mountain to buff her fairies, but at least there is the outer ring of the map we can safely use. She also has a new deck leader that does suit her well, as you'll see her using Dark Witch quite commonly as her beatsticks. It appears though that her deck leader does not have any abilities despite being of major rank, which I assume is what the Easy Start patch was designed to do in order to help you out a little in getting started. That doesn't mean she's a pushover, however. Far from it, actually, as on top of having 90% of the map in her favour, she also runs a massive amount of equip cards, so you can expect to see a lot of Dark Witches, Air Knight Parshoths, and Gyakutenos that are pushing 3000 attack all over the board. And even once you do make one monster to overpower her, you still need to be careful for her traps or effect monsters like Hourglass of Courage that can quickly screw you over. I spent a good couple of hours here, and even when I was able to finally beat her, it was via checkmate after chasing her into a corner with the only 2 big creatures I was able to make. The other duels are similarly difficult, however things started to go a lot smoother after that first duel, probably because I understood the deck a lot better and how to play more smarter. Once again, you'll notice the promotion speed has increased, but not drastically, meaning you will still need to put in some work if you want some new deck leaders and abilities. In my time playing, I still didn't get too far, only getting as far as beating Joey, so about halfway through the campaign. However, it was very satisfying just getting this far, and I think that's the vibe that the mod was trying to achieve. This mod is brutal but never feels unwinnable, and actually requires you to use your cards wisely and not always rely on raw power. It feels as though it's along a similar vein as the Redux mod, as in it makes a lot of similar changes that I liked about Redux, however the difficulty feels more balanced here, relying less on grinding to make your deck strong enough, and more so asking for proper strategy and coordination. However, I do much prefer the map designs in Redux to these ones, as here they just feel heavily biased in the enemy's favour, and starting without any field transformation makes things very difficult. I think what I loved especially about this mod was how close every duel was whether I ended up winning or losing, making every duel feel super intense, and winning gave the same sensation as beating a Dark Souls boss. So, in my personal opinion, I'd highly recommend giving this mod a go if you're looking for a more challenging Duelist of the Roses experience, that's a solid alternative to the Redux mod. As we come towards the end of the list, the next one to take a look at is Project GEMINI. And when you go to install this one, you'll see 2 patches to choose from again. And these are a standard and a challenge version of the mod, with the challenge version supposedly unfinished and unbalanced, so I stuck to trying out just the main version of the mod for this video. Starting up the mod, you'll see this is another one that skips the introduction sequence, similar to All Cards mod, taking you straight to inputting your name and choosing a deck. And when choosing your deck, you'll notice the majority of the starting deck options are the same as in Redux, with the exception here for my name being Rainbow Marine Mermaid as an option instead of Water Dragon Fairy. And to my understanding, these decks are all very similar to their Redux counterparts, with a few minor changes, but the overall strategy is staying the same. So I ended up choosing the Marine Mermaid deck for something different from the decks we've tried before, and was in no way influenced yet again by my favourite VTubers. I feel like we haven't done a water deck yet, so I might choose Marine Mermaid, because I can also make the "Ahoy! I'm honey!" reference. Interestingly, you aren't given the option to side with the Lancastrians and have to choose Kyber's route. I'm assuming this was done for balancing, but it's interesting as locking us to a certain campaign is not something we've seen any other mods do thus far. This deck features a lot of female cards and fish, as you'd probably expect, but also includes a couple of warriors and dragons as well, for some variety in effects and fusion possibilities. The main focus of this deck appears to be to use Root Water or fuse Karyushin in order to convert the field to Umi, which will buff your own creatures, and also by using YuGiOh and Tiz of the Mermaid, you can debuff the enemy as well. So overall, it's pretty strong and versatile. Heading into the first duel against Taya, you'll notice the map looks strangely similar to Taya's map in Redux, albeit with a couple of differences. However, the general layout is still there, with the cross of normal field at the end and labyrinth along the sides. But the weirdest part is that Taya is now a furry, using beast warriors like Nekagal primarily, instead of her usual fairy motif. Which is odd, and I don't know if it really fits her character from any point in the show, but it's nice to see something different, especially as Beast Warriors isn't a deck we've really seen before in this game and its mods. So aside from a couple of equipped Nekagals, which was pretty scary, we managed to make short work of Taya. It may just be that this deck is quite powerful, but the difficulty felt about standard for the vanilla game. Moving on to Tristan, his map is also very familiar, as it's pretty much the same as his map in Redux, but rotated. And I'm not complaining, as I love the Redux map design, so they'd be hard to improve upon. But I think it's clear now that this mod was inspired by and used Redux as its basis. Tristan offered a bit more of a challenge than Taya, with his new deck focusing on female warriors and sitting in a castle of Sogun. But in a poetic moment of Ludo narrative, his warriors soon drowned when we flooded his castle with our water deck. The mod carries on like this through the other duels as well. There are some interesting maps and new enemy decks to face, with some clear inspirations from Redux. However, there are a few fun, unique differences I like, such as with Mai's map, providing you with a cage of labyrinths so she can't just run straight at you with her big scary birds. And the difficulty was a nice casual level. Not too difficult, but challenging enough to make you need to actually try. But if you did want it to be more of a challenge, then there's always the challenge version you could install instead. Also, reincarnation must have been modified, as not only do you get to keep the cards you intended to sacrifice, but we were able to get a couple of the Immortals cards out of it as well, which were very overpowered, but I'd never had the chance to see or use them before, so it was especially fun to get to use those. Overall, I was having a lot of fun with this mod. That was until we reached Bakura. Oh, what is your deck? 552! Excuse me? That's right, his deck cost was 552, and you can't face him unless your cost is the same or lower than his, meaning you need a deck with an average cost per card of 13.8, which is so insanely low I actually couldn't make a deck that low cost with the cards I had available to me. In fact, even after making a deck of only my lowest cost cards, I was still 200 over the required cost, meaning I had to go grind in order to make my deck worse. And after an hour and a half, I just kinda gave up, as I was still about 50 costs too high, with a deck mostly of 10 cost spell cards. This requirement is actually insane, and created a roadblock that sort of ruined it for me a little. So all in all, I really enjoyed this mod for the time I was playing it. It is very reminiscent of Redux and everything I enjoyed about that mod, but it's not nearly as difficult and much more suited to the casual player, with a few of its own added unique twists that I like. However, my progression being hampered, not because of a skill issue, but because I wasn't allowed to even duel the guy, was kind of a bummer to me. I'd still say this mod is worth trying out, just don't forget to keep plenty of low cost cards around, and make sure to use them in reincarnation to get more similarly low cost cards, as this will help speed up the grind and you don't even lose the card you sacrifice in this mod, which is a bonus. The final mod we have is Duelists of the Roses Reworked, and I actually didn't learn about this mod until much later on, when I accidentally found the Reddit page about it whilst looking up information about other mods for this video. Because weirdly enough, searching Google for Duelists of the Roses mods, this one doesn't seem to show up. But it seems appropriate to save this one to last, as it is very different from the others. First of all, this mod doesn't actually modify the game file at all. It works by adding a file with AI overwrites into the cheats folder of your totally real PlayStation 2, and providing you with memory card files, which all have save files with different character-themed decks, that you're supposed to put into the Player 2 memory card slot. This is because the concept of this mod is not to alter the main campaign in any way, but instead to add new post-game content to challenge you after you beat the game. So you're supposed to have a complete save file before you even install the mod. Which I didn't, as the current save file I did have was still stuck at Bakura thanks to the previous mod we looked at. But I figured I would try to test this mod as best as I could in spite of this, and thankfully the file the mod provides you, which overwrites the enemy AI, actually comes with a helpful cheat you can enable, which gives you every card at max rank. But this may have broken the game a little bit, as once you set a deck leader you can't unset them for some reason. And if you try, it just glitches out and goes blank, but still thinks the card that was there previously is still there. Anyways, I tried making a deck I figured would be a reasonable endgame deck. Nothing too crazy and overpowered, because I still wanted to give this mod a fair review. So I made my Dream Harpies deck, which came to 1,179 deck cost, which seemed fair to me. Now, as cool as this mod's concept is, it's janky as hell, in case that wasn't obvious from its installation process. But we were about to learn just how fascinatingly janky it truly was. The bonus duels are designed to be played on new unique maps designed for each character. Only trouble is, the mod doesn't install the custom maps, so you have to go to the map editor and make them yourself. And this only unlocks once you've beaten the campaign. Which is another reason it asks for a completed save file before installing, I suppose. So upon learning this, I figured with all the cards unlocked already, we should be able to just breeze through the campaign and unlock it no problem, right? Well, for fun we made another deck, this time based on female spellcasters to do the campaign with. But what happened next is something we were not expecting at all. So we're messing around with a couple... The game is playing for me. Oh, I'm so confused. Wait. So, the cheats file that makes it so player 2 is automatically controlled by the AI for the mod makes it so if you try and play the campaign with the mod active, it makes the game play itself? Yep. So trying to play a campaign duel results in your deck being considered an enemy and becoming AI controlled. So we accidentally created an auto-battler version of Duels of the Roses. I was suddenly very excited for this concept and the possibility of the challenge to try and beat the whole game this way. Though, another fascinating interaction occurs after you win the duel, because it sends you back to Stonehenge as if you'd just started the game and as if the duel never happened. So, to my despair, it would appear we can't try to beat the game in this way. My guess is that the game is considering the duel as if it were taking place in the free duel menu, but I am curious if there are any modders for this game out there who can look into how this AI versus AI interaction actually occurs, because it is fascinating to me, and to my understanding there isn't a way to have the AI duel itself through any normal means. And I would love to see a mod use it to either have an auto-battler style campaign, or a way to set up CPU tournaments perhaps. Anyways, with the campaign busted, we had no way of accessing the map editor, which is a shame because the maps the creator designed actually all look really unique and interesting. Instead, I figured I would just duel the added decks on a random map that was already available to us. There are 21 episodes in total, but in the time I had I only explored the first 5, with the first 2 being Mai and Bones, whose decks were both pretty similar to their decks in the original game, but upgraded slightly. Mai still uses her Winged Beast's beatdown strategy, but has a few new scary additions, most namely Mirror Wall. Other than that though, she wasn't too bad, and with the deck you have by the end of the campaign, she likely would be a nice challenge, but not unbeatable, similar to your first encounter with her during Kaiba's route. Next up is Bones, but before we start his duel, you can't forget to go to the cheats folder and edit the notepad file to enable his AI. Yes, you have to do this every time you change who you're dueling. Also, after every couple of duels, you'll need to change the player 2 memory card file to the one from the next episode's folder. Bones also has a similar deck and strategy to his own one from the campaign, however, he now has some bigger zombies with some scarier effects, like Snakehair that permanently spellbinds one destroyed, and Patrician of Darkness. This is a great example of why you're supposed to play these duels on the custom designed maps, because I imagine he would be quite tough to beat on the map he was created for, but here he is retreating into the mountain terrain, which is debuffing his creatures, which is normally where wasteland terrain would be on his own map, so I think the AI is just a little confused. And unfortunately this does continue to heavily nerf the enemies if you tackle the mod in this way. Simon has a very new and interesting deck based on the Immortals creatures, which I imagine would be insanely hard to face when his deck leader is surrounded by crushed terrain and he has traps like Gravity Bind. And he was still pretty intimidating, until he just randomly let me walk up to him and hit him for some reason. Panic was also quite scary despite the terrain, using a similar Fiend deck to his usual one, however with many more giant boss monsters like Zera the Mant and Zoa. And also he casts Umi randomly sometimes, not entirely sure why. The final duel we tried for this mod was Weevil Underwood, and I knew we were in for a bad time when his AI file is literally titled Weevil Mini Boss. Apparently this is a feature that every 5 episodes of the mod provides you with an exceptionally challenging duel. And for this guy it didn't matter what map we were playing on, he is terrifying regardless. He has a very on-brand and cool unique concept for his deck, being focused around playing cocoons, making you have to act fast unless you want to face an army of giant moths. Only issue is though, he has possibly one of the most broken cards in the whole game to protect them. Arsenal Bug. This thing is not only huge, but it buffs itself by 1500 when flipped, and is also a walking forest field spell. I gave up at this point, but I imagine with plenty of equips or some removal, this duel is probably possible. But it'd still require you to get lucky in order to be strong enough but also fast enough to stop the cocoons evolving. Overall, in spite of the maps not being what they were supposed to be, and just getting everything set up itself as a hassle, I think this mod does a great job at providing you with a new challenge and something to actually do in the post-game, keeping the theme of each character's decks but upgrading them to a sort of New Game Plus type form, with each episode's enemies you face getting stronger and stronger. In its concept, it's great, and definitely worth the effort, but it was quite confusing trying to get everything working, so just be warned if you do fancy giving this one a go. And that's every mod for Duelists of the Roses that I could find or that was sent to me in my Discord. This game may not have anywhere near as many mods as Forbidden Memories, however I was pleasantly surprised to see that overall the quality and difficulty balancing was actually pretty good. Although, after trying all 6 of these mods, I would assume that the extent to which modding this game is feasible is probably fairly limited, so it's unlikely we will see any groundbreaking new mods be developed for this game now. But despite only really being able to change the maps, what cards you and your opponents have access to, and the enemy AI, each mod managed to do something unique and different. So even with so few to pick from, you'll probably be able to find what it is you're looking for out of a modded Duelists of the Roses experience. I think the main difference to Forbidden Memories as to why that was so much more popular to build mods for, is the ease of access to adding new cards. There were so many creative Forbidden Memories mods where people essentially just made a Forbidden Memories variant of whatever game, show, or even memes they wanted. And it's a shame we don't have the same ability for this game as well. So I can only ever dream of the universe where I get to see a Pokemon mod of this game, complete with their 3D Pokemon Stadium models on each of the cards. In the end, I thoroughly enjoyed trying out each of these mods over the past few weeks, and I feel as though I've developed a deeper understanding and love for the game now. I think it would be nice to revisit 1 or 2 of these mods later down the line to try to beat them, but for now, maybe I'll try playing a different classic Yu-Gi-Oh game like Capsule Monster Coliseum or Falsebound Kingdom. And if you all enjoyed this video as much as the Forbidden Memories one, maybe I'll look into the mods for those games next. And if you're still here, let me pay my YouTube algorithm tax by asking you kindly to like, comment and subscribe. And keep an eye out for future live streams. I stream here on YouTube most days, and I don't just play Yu-Gi-Oh! So check those out if you're interested. But that about does it for me. I'll catch y'all in the next one.